We will now invite Irene Arias, CEO of ID Lab, to moderate, and we'll invite the panelists, Pablo Zamora, President of Fundación Chile, also Edgardo Frias, Country Director for Chile, Peru, and Colombia for Google, Aisin Echeverri as well, for Minister of Science, Technology, Knowledge, and Innovation for Chile. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to discuss such a relevant current topic. It's a topic that raises a number of concerns, many discussed by Cristina just now, but it also encourages us to dream and to aspire to a different future. We see it as a great tool to help us address the most complex problems the world faces that affect Latin America and the Caribbean in particular, not just productivity, with the examples that Cristina mentioned. And it happens in an increasingly accelerated way. AI can address productivity challenges in a more effective, efficient way. It can help us leapfrog and address social challenges, access to health, education, the environment. The meeting that Cristina mentioned also makes clear that pondering on this issue and using AI tools or rather using human intelligence on digital platforms requires significant collaboration from the private, public sector, and civil society. This panel is the representation of this. We will hear the vision of Minister Echeverri as a leader in the public sector, but we also hear from a big tech company and obviously Pablo, from his perspective, from his current position, but also being an entrepreneur who uses AI, who's made use of it in a spectacular way. So we will learn a great deal through this panel, and we will take on this challenge. I wanted to provide some additional context for this discussion and why we have scheduled this panel. Here I want to recognize Gonzalo Rivas and the IDB team, but last December we launched the AI framework for the Inter-American Development Bank, a comprehensive strategy that seeks to foster responsible adoption of AI and support innovation and inclusive development. And the framework takes on AI potential to work with institutions of governance, data and infrastructure, and people and talent. At the same time, we're not just preparing these frameworks, we are investing in companies that develop AI applications and that use them. We're also working on ensuring that the best standards are implemented, and we are doing this through the Fair Lack initiative, which is aligned with the OECD principles and allows companies, governments, and startups to have a practical way of understanding the repercussions of their algorithmic models vis-a-vis society and systems and solutions, and to work to improve it in all these areas so that the application of AI is indeed something that benefits society at large. At IDB, we've developed LATAM GPT, the first open LLM created for Latin America and the Caribbean by Senia, financed by Bit Ciencias, making IDB publications available to train an inclusive and effective AI for the region. So these are a few examples that prove that achieving this objective requires joint efforts, collaboration, concrete initiatives, and once again, to be able to have these encounters, these meetings where we can have this interaction in a hybrid way across all the different sectors, private, public, civil society. Before I give the floor to the panelists, I'll remind you that there is a QR code that you can use to send your questions, and at the end we will have a Q&A session to interact and address them. So I'll start by Minister Echeverri. I'll start by thanking you, and through you, the Chilean government for being our host and providing such a warm welcome. You have been a firm supporter of adoption and use of AI in Chile. We would love to hear what roadmap you envision to ensure that AI is a vehicle that leverages innovation in the region. And how do you make sure that the technology is not just a technology in itself, that it addresses real problems?
Primero que nada,
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with the rest of the panel. It's hard to know where to start in answering your question. Maybe I should start by telling you what it's been like working with the countries of Latin America, because I do believe that over the last year and a half or 2 years, we have gone through a learning process, and that has enabled us to develop a roadmap. And I think the process was as important as the result. Those of us who've lived and worked in Latin America know that it's not always easy to coordinate with our neighbors. And when it comes to science and technology, it's more common for our entrepreneurs, our scientists to collaborate with Europe or the US rather than with other Latin American countries. So we began to work with the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean in the context of AI. And we did so with some reluctance, but we said, let's try it and see what happens. But we really did not have great expectations. The meeting took place in Santiago in 2023. And I think it was instrumental for what came after, because it broached work on policies having to do with AI. And I say policy because it's not just looking at AI as a tool, but rather how can it become an accelerator of development in our countries, and also how it does that without jeopardizing or threatening our cosmovision. And it's not just about language, it's about our history, our geography, our culture, how we interact with each other, which is unique, and all of that has to be factored into how we develop it. So the Declaration of Santiago laid out a common vision, and that made it possible for us to engage in an exercise which changed things. We have been holding monthly meetings. We had a meeting in Montevideo last year. This year it will be in the Dominican Republic. And what has happened along the way is that, starting with that key component, that common perspective, very clear lines of work have emerged. Someone mentioned ChatGPT. It's harder to be more concrete than that, but we wagered on having a Latin American model, also relying on organizations to trust us and to be willing to put in their data, and to have organizations like the IDB and others providing financing was made a difference. And we'll see what comes next year, but it's an example of how you can translate things into a specific vision. When it comes to computational capacity, things are happening. We're working in the countries. We're working on shared models. And I think that is what strengthens our collaboration, which came out of this shared vision. So to answer your question, how do we see the roadmap? It's a roadmap where the components, and we know what they are, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need talent, we need infrastructure, we need researchers. So that is what countries are investing in. That is what we're collaborating on. And we envisage developing and implementing the guideline that in a way that is Latin American and does reflect our realities. Thank you very much. Edgardo, now having heard this, I'd like to ask you to share your perspective based on your own experience with Google. We worked together a year ago, and we had a digital skills and talent course targeted at improving the capacity of exporting MSMEs in this domain. We've seen that the adoption of this guideline is by MSMEs is not an easy thing to achieve. So we also had a course on the economics of data to share information about data usage with the companies. And it is a long road, and we'd like to ask you to tell us how you think a sector as important for the Latin American Caribbean economy, in other words, MSMEs, can effectively integrate and adopt this technology despite the existing constraints. And what are the constraints and how can we overcome them? Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I feel that I'm turning my back to you when I look over here, but I'll do my best to answer the question. Clearly, the MSMEs are a driver for our economies, and we need to harness technology. We need to help MSMEs acquire the skills they need, not only to work within their markets, but also externally, and that is why we are offering courses that is aimed at providing MSMEs with these skills. We want to take them to another level, but technology alone cannot do that. We need to train them. We need to bring people together. We need to build trust and have them believe that technology is there to empower them, not to replace them. The doom and gloom message is that technology is going to replace humans. But what we want to do is to equip people with the means to make a better use of technology and use technology to automate burdensome taxes. We have some SMEs lacking data systems, and they need information. How, for example, in order to schedule their contacts with clients, they can use these tools to do this. MSMEs are more focused on the client, on being out in the streets, connecting with people, and sometimes they have 6 or 7 different hats, different roles. Pablo, you know this firsthand. You're a manager, a programmer, you're in charge of financing, of human resources. And all of those tasks are very important to enable the MSMEs focus on what is important for them in order to work to achieve their objectives, their reason they were created, and that's what we want to do, or help them do. A few months ago, we announced a grant of 750 million that is aimed at doing this and to train more than 65,000 people working for MSMEs and working for the public sector. Not just so that they can find out about AI solutions, rather to have them adopt and learn to use these technologies to do the work they need to do. So that is our purpose. And that is why we want to use technology to solve real problems. It's not just technology for the sake of technology. You mentioned an important word, and it's truth or trust, and I'd like to come back to that later, if I may. Pablo, one of the strategic initiatives that is part of Chile's current public policy is boosting science and technology-based entrepreneurship and the ecosystem that makes it possible for it to grow in a way that is sustaining and also addresses social challenges. And that approach is meant to increase the chances to scale up businesses. We are here with a foundation. We signed an agreement to create a new startup lab, Point oh One, and IDB Lab is going to be working as part of this partnership in order to bring innovations that are ready for investments in this space in order to help develop them in a responsible manner. Now, in this context and with this great opportunity we have in this new phase of collaboration here in Chile, how do you think the guidelines can help companies to validate what they're doing and consolidate their efforts and grow as fast as the examples Cristina showed us a while ago? We'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Thank you for the question. I would say that businesses can use AI to make their processes more efficient. In the case of science and technology-based businesses, it's even more important because AI makes it possible to create industries, not just generate impact or improve productivity. I came back from a meeting in California where there were several companies that were developing genomes that do not currently exist, to create organisms that don't yet exist. They're using AI to see how this would impact drugs and using models so that don't have to be clinical models as we develop these pharmaceutical products. So I think that this type of approach makes it possible to generate productivity. Also, it pushes the frontier of knowledge. AI is happening with another great revolution, which is biotechnology. So they're happening in tandem. So we're at the frontier of creating new industries and new enterprises. So these companies need new knowledge, and that is what enables them to use their business model to scale up and achieve the impact they need. But since new data are being generated and they're the property of the companies, they can then use them with AI to generate completely different solutions. This has two consequences. It creates new industries, and also it makes it possible for them to challenge companies that are not as efficient, and you're able to displace them, and the companies are able to have greater market share. So it is a tool that enables them to better position themselves and to take market share away from established companies that are not doing what startups are doing. In Chile, about 40% of new jobs come from these companies, and many of them have a technology or scientific base. So I do think this has an economic impact for companies rather. It increases productivity and efficiency, etc., but it also has another impact, which is it creates jobs, skilled jobs. So use knowledge to adapt AI, to develop new types of AI, and also to generate knowledge. And that new knowledge is going to be the driver of new models. So I think that This is a virtuous convergence, and we're seeing many companies that have been able to position themselves globally using a combination of new knowledge and their own metadata to generate new tools. I think everybody knows this, but what you just said, how to push that frontier and create new markets, and also take that scientific knowledge to markets. Pablo, as co-founder of NotCo, is practicing what he preaches. So before we go back to Minister Echeverri, I'd like to ask you to give us one example of something that you find exciting. What would be a new market for you? Everything having to do with pharmacology. Not everybody has to be a scientist, but it's important not to use single molecules, as pharmaceuticals have been telling us. There's no single molecule that targets a cell response independently that then becomes systemic. The way nature and the human body works is through cocktails. They're hard to copy because we have a response that is protein driven. And now, using AI models, we're changing the practice. We're going to be generating a comprehensive response from the organism with very few side effects. And that is going to make for a better patient response to medication. So pharmacology is undergoing drastic changes, and some of those who develop single molecules are the main opponents of this concept. Also, there's another process which I'm very excited by. It's to model a human being with all he or her metabolic reactions and use that to test in silic drugs without having to go through clinical trials and without having to take 10 years to develop a new drug or a medication for a virus, for example. And that needs hard science, it needs data, and it's going to radically change how the industry works. Well, if we needed some inspiration, I think that we have just heard a very good example. So we've heard how SMEs can position themselves when it comes to science and technology, but I'd like to ask Minister Echeverri what happens in the public sector once the AI law is in place. What can we expect? It's interesting how we see stories repeat themselves. In the public sector, we don't work with pharmacology, but we do at the Institute of Health. What we have seen is a growing interest to incorporate AI in different services because of its impact, not just in efficiency, which is very evident, but in improving the quality of services, and that is something that has very positive benefits. What we have seen in Chile is a very rapid proliferation of this implementation. We have more than 100 versions of AI use in public services, ranging from supporting hospitals with diagnosis, also management of hospital beds, which is a huge challenge when our healthcare systems are stressed. Also by public prosecutor's office, they use AI to accelerate investigations. On the Social Security front, there are models that make it possible to forecast who is not going to be able to withdraw their benefits, and also when it comes to the environment. As I was saying, there's more than 100 examples of AI applications, and all of it is having a positive impact on the public sector's response to the needs of the citizens. Now, having said this, and as is the case with any tool, we as a government decided early on to set rules, guardrails. This tool can work very well, but we need to have a certain amount of consensus regarding the conditions under which they're going to be used or implemented. and these rules are not extreme. We need to inform citizens that AI is in use so that they can be aware of their rights. Also, we need to ensure that the services using AI are doing it not just because, but because there is a solution. It is a solution to something they need to solve. Oftentimes, speaking to another human being can lead to a better outcome than a technological tool. And that is a decision that our services have to take and should explore on an ongoing basis. What we have been able to do is with this law is to have ongoing development of the systems and to do it in a way that is consistent with our objectives. We want to have a state that is more present and that is more efficient. So it's not just technology for the sake of technology. Now, what is missing? Because we can continue to work as we are now, setting rules, but we know that technology is disruptive at all levels. And that is why last year we decided to work on regulations. We've been asked why so quickly, why not wait and see what happens in other countries like the US, where they develop regulation and are now rolling back those regulations under the current administration. We had long talks with the industry on the scope of self-regulation and how far to go. But after all of that, after all the analyses and having seen what is happening at the international level, I would say that it was the right decision to set ground rules as to where and how AI can be used. And I'd like to take a minute here to say that it's easy to fall into a discussion as to whether regulating these technologies inhibits innovation or slows it down. Some could argue that, but I do think we need to make an effort to look at this more broadly. When we speak of AI, I would say the question the countries and the parliaments need to ask is whether we want the guidelines to be used or AI to be used to generate child pornography videos. The answer is no. We do not want that to happen. Do we want AI to be used to lead children to do things that are harmful to them emotionally or physically? No, we don't want that to happen. So we're not asking whether to innovate or not. We do need to innovate. We need to foster innovation. We need to promote it by using the right tools. But the social discussion of what it is that we want technology to do for our citizens is a discussion that needs to happen. And it needs to take place in the parliaments, not just at the level of businesses, because it has a social impact. It does not just impact a productive process. So we're still working on our bill of law. There's been a very interesting discussion in Congress. Our representatives and we as well have made a monumental effort to fully grasp what is behind the technology without ever losing sight of the fact that this is a discussion about social rules, not about how a technology works. And if we can separate those two worlds, I think we'll be able to take steps in the right direction. Thank you very much, Minister, and I think you just answered one of the questions we had about potential trade-offs or dilemmas we all grapple with. So thank you. Edgardo, I want to discuss another thing with you, and it's infrastructure. What is needed for all of this to be viable? We've seen that in the region, there's been efforts to convert energy into intelligence. These are centers, data centers that are bigger than the National Stadium here, the one we visited yesterday. How do we get ready in Latin America and the Caribbean to equip ourselves with the infrastructure that is needed for all of this to work? It's hard to answer that because we have different circumstances in different countries of the region. But as a point of reference, I'd like to mention the Artificial Intelligence Index as a starting point. It is a way to bring countries in and look at how they compare. We need to look at how prepared countries are to adopt AI, but we also need to consider soft skills. Are they adopting these AI solutions? And it's not just about the size of the countries. We need to see where the different opportunities available to them are. Chile has been leading the charge, but we can't say that Mexico or Brazil lag behind. I think there are different ways of looking at countries' positions, and that is where we find opportunities. So it's not just infrastructure. We need to perhaps focus on learning, training for people to know how to use this. And as the minister was saying, bringing in academia, of course, the governments, and also the private sector. So we need to be more prepared for a better future, and technology should not be something that technology is used to empower human beings, not to replace them. Thank you. We'll be looking for information about that index. We already have numbers for 2023 and 2024, so I would invite you to check it out. The best rank, or the top of the list in 2024, Chile is number one on the list based on the index. We have 5 minutes left. We have received some questions from the audience. So I will come back to you, Pablo, and also we'll go back to Cristina, because the questions have to do with the challenges in the realm of intellectual property, which you mentioned, and how do we generate the right incentives for some industries like AV so that they can continue to develop. Maybe you could elaborate on the point you made in your presentation and tie this in with what Pablo was saying. He is an entrepreneur, but he also formerly was the president of Fundación Chile and Banco Estado, and perhaps you can tell us what provides the right incentives for companies to continue to innovate in this area. Can you hear me? I think there's a number of incentives. First is the law that was put in place in Chile. It includes tax incentives for pre-competitive development, and Chile has been very smart in the startup world in fostering disruptive policies, and the Startup Lab initiative was instrumental because it enabled companies to be created and also to thrive and scale up. And it's important for companies to have their R&D developments and to have pre-competitive exercises so they can compete on the international market. So I think that what technology does, it also makes some companies more viable than others. I worked with the mining industry, and we see that they have become quite sophisticated. Not only do they have to deal with socio-environmental factors, but also with technology, also green hydrogen. So elements have to be factored in that can make them competitive from day one. So we have public policy tools that can empower the companies. Also, the companies need to have a voice when discussions take place, not just about AI policy. In the case of Chile, I would say that what is missing, well, it's that most of the existing companies, the leading companies in Chile, need to take a more active role in R&D. They must also have closer ties with academia and with research centers and the work they're doing so that they can be on the leading edge. It's not enough to be competitive in Chile. We have a competitive and organized market, but if we want to have a global impact, we also need to be competitive at that level. So we have to take bolder decisions and also develop talent that can also enable us to be competitive at that scale. Thank you, Pablo. Cristina, would you like to come in on this?
The issue of IPR and audiovisual and scientific media. Today, dynamics are different already. It's not the same to develop a synthetic sequence via AI that works as a molecule to cure a disease. What capacity does AI to produce something equally potent today? Intellectual property perfectly protects that sequence. It can be patented. You can have all the economic rights to use it. But the world of creation and cultural industries is very difficult. I don't know how it will evolve there. I don't know whether it will be the same or different as in science. I think it's practically impossible, as I said at the beginning, to determine where inspiration ends and the copy begins. It's very difficult to attribute authorship. I think the dynamics will come from mass use and the success of something that works. The success of creation is that it evokes emotion in the people that will enjoy that artistic creation, and that's what will mark the difference. We will surely use AI at mass levels more than now, but we can't go against technology. Technology needs to flow. Innovation always produces inequality. That's the way it is. We saw it with COVID. If we weren't able to massively produce vaccines, who would have benefited from that process? Well, only those who are in a position to produce them, and the others would have been left behind, and that's what happened. In the Cesar Hidalgo session, who was a great Chilean researcher, said, now everything can be predicted. If this is successful, then we can predict scenarios and what can come to happen and what are the undesirable effects. I think that Chile has been a pioneer country in advancing neuro rights. It's a major right that doesn't get recognition by countries. To look at IP dynamics, it matters. It doesn't, not that much, because we can't distinguish the difference, but that's what we need to determine, and especially protect citizens from undesired effects in the medium and long term. Thank you, Cristina, Minister, Edgardo, Pablo, for sharing your thoughts and your perspective. I think we've learned a great deal. Thank you all for all the questions, those that sent them to us, and let's continue on this path of fostering R&D elevated to the AI. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a Irene, nuestra moderadora, también a los panelistas y a Keynote Speaker por este.
Thank you to the moderator and the panelists for this very interesting seminar, and we thank you for being here with us in person, and to those who are following online and streaming channels. We will see you in a little under half hour. We will hear from IDB President Elon Gold.